Xi Jinping just purged 58 senior officials in 9 months, including generals he personally promoted, his own hand-picked defense ministers. Gone. That's not strength, that's fear. And here's why it means war with Taiwan is less likely right now, not more. I'm Miro. I study geopolitics to understand what's actually possible, not what sounds dramatic. Everyone's worried Xi will invade Taiwan, launch a war, take the risk. But here's what they're missing. Xi's own system is making war nearly impossible right now. Not because he's peaceful, because the risks are catastrophic and he knows it. 4 reasons explain why, and by the end, you'll understand why China's strategy looks more like pressure without war, not invasion. First, the purges. In the first 9 months of 2024 alone, at least 58 high-ranking officials lost their positions. 642,000 officials at various levels were punished. That's not a cleanup. That's a system eating itself. Defense Minister Li Shangfu vanished in mid-2023, expelled in 2024 for corruption. His predecessor, Wei Fenghe? Same fate. Both were Xi's own appointments. The entire rocket force command structure? Gutted. Senior generals investigating equipment corruption. Admirals suspended. Theater commanders disappearing from public view. Here's what that means. Xi is purging the very people who would have to execute a Taiwan invasion, the officers who control missiles, amphibious forces, and theater commands. Why? Because he doesn't trust them. He suspects corruption, disloyalty, factional resistance, but you can't purge your military leadership for 3 years straight and then ask them to fight the most complex amphibious war in modern history. Trust matters. Command cohesion matters. Institutional memory matters. Xi has been systematically destroying all 3. Chinese military analysts admit this openly. They published slogans criticizing the PLA's 2 inabilities. 1. The PLA's ability to fight a modern war is not sufficient. 2. The ability of officers to command modern war is not sufficient. That's not foreign propaganda. That's China's own assessment. So Xi faces a choice. Keep purging to maintain control, or stop purging and risk the military developing independence. Either way, launching a war while your own generals are being investigated is strategic insanity, but purges are just the political problem. The economic problem is even worse. Second, the economy. China's economy is still growing on paper, about 5% in 2024. But the growth mix is dangerous. Youth unemployment hit 21% in June 2023. So embarrassing that Beijing stopped publishing the data entirely. When they resumed 6 months later under a new methodology that excludes students, the number magically dropped to 15%. That's not improvement. That's statistical manipulation. Capital flight? $496 billion left China in 2024. The largest capital account deficit on record. Foreign direct investment? Down 25% in 2024, down another 9% in 2025. 15,000 millionaires and billionaires left China in 2024, the largest wealth exodus from any country globally. The property sector, which used to be 30% of GDP, is operating at half capacity. Sales down over 20%. Local governments drowning in debt. Here's why this matters for war. A Taiwan conflict would trigger immediate Western sanctions, probably modeled on what happened to Russia after Ukraine. Trade with the US and Europe would collapse. The currency would crash. Capital controls would tighten even further. Analysts estimate China could lose close to 9% of GDP in even a limited Taiwan conflict. That's not over years. That's immediate economic damage from sanctions, supply chain disruption, and investor panic. Xi is already managing youth unemployment, capital flight, and property collapse. A war that adds 9% GDP loss on top of that? That's regime-level risk. Economic pain doesn't stay economic, it becomes political, and Xi knows that better than anyone. But even if the economy could handle it, the military has a fatal weakness. Third, the PLA has not fought a real war since 1979. 46 years of peace, no large-scale combat, no modern joint operations under fire, No amphibious landings against a defended coast. The last time China fought, the technology was completely different. No satellites, no precision missiles, no networked command systems. It was a border skirmish with Vietnam using Cold War equipment. The U.S. Defense Department states this directly. PLA forces, including special operations, lack real-world combat experience. They have not demonstrated the capability to execute sophisticated urban warfare or long-distance logistics at the scale required for Taiwan. Even Chinese military publications admit what they call the peace disease, the danger that long peace erodes real combat skills, initiative, and the ability to adapt under fire. Here's the specific problem. A Taiwan invasion requires the most complex military operation imaginable: amphibious assault, air superiority, missile suppression, urban warfare, joint fires across 5 domains, all executed simultaneously under enemy fire. The PLA has never done anything remotely close to this scale. Not in exercises, not in real combat, never. They practice, they run simulations, they study American wars in Iraq and Ukraine, but simulation is not the same as live combat where the enemy adapts, communications fail, and casualties mount. Training can teach tactics. It cannot teach how commanders react when the plan collapses, when casualties exceed expectations, when political pressure demands results faster than operations allow. Corruption purges make this worse. When you remove experienced commanders mid-preparation and replace them with politically loyal but operationally untested officers, you're gambling that loyalty compensates for inexperience. It doesn't. But the biggest problem isn't the military. It's Xi himself. Fourth, Xi owns the decision completely. China operates under something called the CMC Chairman Responsibility System, the Central Military Commission. Xi is the chairman. Under this system, all significant military decisions are planned and decided by the chairman, not the Politburo, not a committee, Xi personally. This is written into the constitution. Military propaganda emphasizes that the chairman holds the final deciding vote, that officers must implement the chairman's intent without question. Recent purges show how serious this is. Top generals were accused of severely trampling the chairman responsibility system. That's a political crime. Disagreeing with Xi on professional military grounds can be redefined as disloyalty. Here's what that creates: a decision-making system where subordinates fear delivering bad news, where optimistic assessments are rewarded and cautious ones are risky, where independent judgment gets people purged. For Taiwan, this means Xi is making decisions based on information filtered through fear. Intelligence that's skewed optimistic, military readiness reports that overstate capability, economic impact assessments that downplay risk. But here's the trap. Under the chairman responsibility system, a failed war is unambiguously Xi's personal failure. Not the parties, not the systems. Xi's. Chinese analysts have written that a disastrous Taiwan war could produce outcomes worse than the Cultural Revolution, including potential mutiny or what they call a bloody reckoning for the warmakers. Xi has staked his entire legitimacy on national rejuvenation, on the China dream, on restoring greatness. A failed Taiwan invasion doesn't just end that dream, it ends him. So he's trapped. He's built a system where no one can stop him if he decides on war, but he's also built a system where failure means regime collapse, where all blame flows directly to him, where there are no institutional safety nets. That's not a recipe for reckless war. That's a recipe for extreme caution about the one gamble that could destroy everything. So what does he do instead? If Xi can't risk war, what's the strategy? Pressure without war. What analysts call gray zone operations. This means constant, incremental coercion that stays below the threshold of armed conflict. Coast Guard vessels harassing Philippine ships, ramming, water cannons, boarding fishing boats, PLA aircraft entering Taiwan's air defense zone daily. Sometimes over 100 sorties in a single day, normalizing the presence, exhausting Taiwan's response capacity. Economic pressure, trade restrictions, tourism bans, informal embargoes targeting countries that cross Beijing's red lines. Legal warfare, using domestic laws and selective readings of international law to justify each move. framing aggression as law enforcement, making each step look routine. The goal isn't decisive victory, it's slow erosion. Change the facts on the ground, normalize Chinese control, exhaust opponents, make resistance feel futile. China calls this advancing without attacking, build artificial islands, position Coast Guard forces, expand surveillance networks, pre-position for future conflict while avoiding the war itself. This strategy has already worked in the South China Sea. Despite losing the 2016 international court case, China effectively controls vast areas through persistent gray zone pressure. No war, no invasion, just constant grinding presence. Taiwan is getting the same treatment: daily military pressure, economic coercion, political isolation. The message: resistance is exhausting, expensive, and ultimately pointless. For Xi, this is the safer path: progress without catastrophic risk, pressure without triggering US intervention, advancement without betting the regime on one military gamble. It's not satisfying for nationalist audiences who want reunification now, but it's survivable. And for Xi, survival matters more than speed. Let me bring this together. Xi Jinping is not weak. He controls the party, he controls the military, he controls the propaganda machine, but he faces four constraints that make war nearly impossible right now. Purges have destabilized the very military he'd need to fight. The economy can't handle the sanctions and disruption a Taiwan war would trigger. The PLA has no modern combat experience for the most complex operation imaginable, and Xi personally owns the decision in a system where failure means his end. None of this means war is impossible forever. It means the risks right now are prohibitive, the costs are catastrophic, the uncertainties are massive. So instead of war, expect more of what we're already seeing: gray zone pressure, Coast Guard harassment, economic coercion, legal warfare, incremental advances that avoid triggering full conflict. Xi's system makes him powerful and trapped. He can't be stopped, but he also can't afford to lose. And a Taiwan war is the one gamble where losing destroys everything. That's not peace. That's a different kind of danger. Constant pressure, slow erosion, war without war. The conflict continues, but the math says invasion isn't coming yet. If this helped you understand what's actually driving China's strategy, share it with someone tired of hype. And if you want to see how people build location-independent income and travel freedom when big powers make decisions above their heads, check out the Freedom Cruise Blueprint linked below.